Bom dia.
Bom dia, Malu.
Ana, bom, tantos amigos aí. Bom dia a todos.
Ô, Franklin. Oi, Franklin.
Salve, tudo bem?
Bem, e você?
Marcos,
ótimo.
a gente já está ao vivo
Bom
no
te ver.
YouTube, tá?
Ah, já estamos ao vivo, mas é para iniciar? Ou ainda...
Eu só estou avisando. Yuri, você toca aqui a parte mais técnica, por favor.
Bom dia a todos, podemos começar.
Ok. Bom dia, né, a todos e a todas que nos acompanham aí, tanto no Zoom quanto no YouTube. Meu nome é Marcos Bicudo, sou o chair, né, do CBEDS, e como manda aqui o protocolo, eu vou mudar aqui para o tecla Zap, aqui para o inglês, dado que, né, o nosso ilustre convidado, né, o Peter Bakker, vai proferir aí, fazer a sua intervenção em inglês também, tá? So good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to have you all early in the morning. We have many people following us in this great event where we will host Peter Bakker. Peter Bakker is the president and CEO of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And CBEDS, the Conselho Empresarial Brasileiro para o Desenvolvimento Sustentável, is the Brazilian chapter of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. We work together. And today, I would like really to just to say that we have many CEOs with us. We have Andrea Clark from Siemens. We have Tania Constantino from Microsoft. Who else here? We have my predecessor here, Franklin Feder. Hey, Franklin, welcome. He was the previous chair of this event and a great contributor to the development of sustainable development. Sorry for the redundancy. In Brazil, we have André Araújo from Shell. Please, the other CEOs from the council that are present, just say hello, please. I see Orson here, right, Orson? Who else is
here? How you doing?
Yes, just so we can, I can't find everybody here in the list, too many people. So I apologize if I did not mention any other CEO of our council. But I think the idea of today is basically, when we go back to 2010, when the World Business Council for Sustainable Development launched the Vision 2050, which was a tremendous framework to provoke the world to get into this new sustainable development path. And the document was quite successful. And basically, CBEDS also, in 2012, we decided to join the same effort, and we adapted that document to the Brazilian context. And the document was really well accepted by all the actors in the Brazilian society. And CBEDS got a tremendous positive feedback from public sector, from the academia, from many other actors of society. In 2019, you know, the world has changed quite dramatically in the last 10 years, and both the World Business Council and CBEDS decided to update the document, and we are really working hard to provide a new perspective, a new document, an updated version of the 2050, and of course, taking into consideration this pandemic wave that we are all going through. And that's the idea of today's meeting. Peter will talk and will give the global perspective of the Vision 2050 and the impact of the pandemic and how he's looking at this landscape for the future. So he'll have like 20 to 30 minutes, he'll talk, and then we will have questions. Unfortunately, given the time, we'll have to reserve this time of our event for questions for the council members, for the CEOs to ask the questions. If we have time, we allow other questions, but let's see how this meeting goes. Just to mention that Marina is the president of the Conselho Empresarial Brasileiro para o Desenvolvimento Sustentável from SEBEDS. She's facing some technical issues and she will join us during the course of the meeting. Did I miss anything here, Tatiana? Or shall we give the word to Peter? Is that it?
That's it. I think we can give Peter the word, and I don't know if he's using a PowerPoint or not, but Peter, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. Peter has been a great leader, inspiring leader for us and for the private sector and for the many other actors of society. So we welcome you, Peter, and the mic is yours. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much, Marcos, and good morning to all of you. I hope you can hear me well. Special welcome to Andrea Alvarez. She's a council member from Natura company and also an EXCO member of WBCSD globally, so very involved in the work we all do. Like you said, Marcos, what I want to do is give an overview of how do we see the role of business change post the COVID-19 crisis, realizing that post-COVID is maybe a bit of an ambitious statement because I know in your country, you are still under severe pressure from it and the world is watching cautiously every time to see the news coming from Brazil, but it's not just Brazil, you know, India, the USA flaring up at this point in time. And if I see the behavior of consumers in Europe, I would not be surprised is also Europe will at one point face a severe second wave. We all started 2020 thinking this was going to be the super year, you know, the COP for biodiversity would happen, where the world would get serious around nature. COP26 was the climate COP was announced with a lot of ambition to get now serious about decarbonizing the world under the UK government leadership. Trust in society continued to be on a decline if you listen to the World Economic Edelman Trust Barometer. And of course, everywhere around the world, and unfortunately also in your part of the world, social tensions remained high with, of course, flare-ups in yellow vests and Hong Kong protests and otherwise. And then, of course, COVID happened. You know, we can write history books later, I assume, whether we should have known, could have known. But my conclusion is we were all ill-prepared, whether that is supply chains of companies, whether it's countries responding, whether it's public healthcare systems. This pandemic and the speed at which it covered the globe has really taken us by surprise. You know the statistics well. By now, officially more than 10 million people infected, probably in the reality many more than 500,000 deaths and rising. At one point in time, more than 50% of the world's population working from home through lockdowns and confinements and other measures that government had to take in place. I don't know if it has reached Brazil yet, but WBCSD a few weeks ago issued an issue brief that looked at the vulnerabilities that COVID-19 has exposed. And if I summarize the four big buckets, then the primacy of economic development over everything else is one of the vulnerabilities that was exposed. The realities of inequality, which I know is a big topic in Brazil, have been exposed. As I said, fragility of global healthcare systems, almost universally in the world. No distinction really between developing or developed countries, all countries in the world reaching their peak capacities quite quickly. And then last but not least, close to my old heart, is the downsides of hyper-efficient, just-in-time global supply chains have really been been exposed as well. So in our opinion, COVID will probably change more than we now anticipate. We were ill prepared. The resilience of our system wasn't strong enough. Business as usual or return to normal will probably not be the same or should not be the same as it was before COVID. We're all, and I am very convinced, all of the business leaders on the call today, we're all facing totally unknown levels of uncertainty. The way that demand has dropped off, supply chains are yet to be proven to be put back to stability. So it's and of course economic recession and the length of that recession luring as a potentially very impactful event to deal with. I don't think I need to explain on this call what WBCSD is. Sebets has been one of our longest standing partners, and we're very appreciative of the work that we do together and the real interaction we have with your Brazilian network into our global conversations. But just to summarize, our mission is to make more sustainable business more successful. And what we mean with that is we now need to drive harder, even harder than before the COVID, to make sure that if your company is more sustainable, your cost of capital will be lower. And I'll explain that in a little while. That's the real purpose of the programs that we're addressing here in the World Business Council. Sustainability in itself has become a rather complex set of words. Now we have the Sustainable Development Goals, 17 goals, 169 targets. We have the Paris Agreement, we have ESG reporting, and we have a whole alphabet soup. But what I begin to say louder and louder is we need to simplify sustainability to allow people to really focus. And I would say we need to focus on 3 areas. First, the climate emergency. If you think the COVID is a wave that has shocked many of us, there is a tsunami of shocks waiting when the climate change really takes a brunt at the societies in which we operate. The second priority ought to be nature loss, or for sustainability people on the line, biodiversity loss. And I see Marina has joined. Good morning, Marina. Good to see you. You're on mute.
Peter. Sorry, I had some technological problems.
Ah, well, you're here. You made it. So the second priority is nature loss or biodiversity loss. And the third priority is inequality, which of course in COVID has been exposed more and more. And even though I label them in 3 buckets, climate emergency, biodiversity loss, and inequality, I think the one key lesson that COVID-19 has brought to us is that all these risks are actually interconnected. You know, there is now strong evidence that the pressure that we collectively put on nature, in particularly deforestation, is one of the main drivers for pandemics like this to emerge. It is also clear that once you have a health challenge like this, inequality gets exposed in an accelerated fashion. Now, the best example in the world, or the worst example you could argue in the world, is probably the USA at this point in time, where 7 weeks into the COVID crisis, more than 40 million people had lost their jobs. And in the US system, losing your job is the same as losing your health insurance. And that in the middle of a pandemic like this is, of course, socially a very hard task to master. At the same time, we have seen that if you prevent pandemics at the scale that governments around the world have had to respond, that has enormous environmental benefits. CO2 emissions globally in the months of April were reduced by 8%. That has never happened before. By the way, it is the kind of run rate that we need to get onto on an annual basis. That's around just above 7% annually reduction to make the Paris Agreement stick. But what we saw is health prevention leads to incredible environmental benefits. And so you see that this climate, nature, inequality, health are all interconnected elements. To get on top of that interconnectedness, we built the belief here that business needs to think about solutions through system transformations. And that really is the main link into Vision 2050. Maybe 10 years ago, we would talk about topics in climate, we do this, in nature, we do that, in inequality, we do something else. Today, you must really think about the interconnectedness and how the systems need to be transformed. So I think it was only last week that Filippo, who's also on the line somewhere, and the team have issued another issue brief on what actually are system transformations and what is the contribution that business can make to those system transformations happening. But the 6 big system transformations that need to happen in the world are first and foremost, the energy system needs to decarbonize. The second is the resource system, the raw materials we use, need to move from a linear to a circular economic model. The third system that needs to change is the food and land use system. Agriculture is an incredibly important system to feed all people in the world, but at the same time has tremendous environmental and health and poverty aspects that it needs to deal with. So that system needs to transform. The fourth system is the way we think about systems, cities, and mobilities needs to change. We need greener transport, greener buildings, and the likes. The fifth system that we need to think about is the social contract for the 21st century. In the past, we would have said human rights in supply chains are critical. Inclusion and diversity are important. The future of work are truly important. But I think with the vulnerabilities exposed by COVID, we need to capture that all under a bigger umbrella, and let's call it the social contract for the 21st century. And then the last system transformation that needs to happen is capitalism itself. And I'll talk a bit about that in the end of my speech. So I said I would want to talk about how will this crisis change business? And I have 3 types of buckets for you. The first one is, how do businesses respond to the COVID crisis as such? The second bucket is, how do I believe this should focus the sustainability of all companies on the line and beyond? And the third one is, how will this changing capitalism impact business, and how can business position itself to be amongst the ones who attract the lowest cost of capital first? So let me go to COVID response first. First and foremost, every company needs to take care of the health of its employees and of the customers it serves. And you know, if you go to the WBCSD website, and I'm sure Sebats has something similar, you will see incredible examples of how businesses have responded to this crisis, often faster and some would say better than governments were able to do. But it's the primary responsibility of everyone in business. Let's make sure our people and our customers are safe. The second is undeniable and maybe not desirable, but we need to manage the economic fallout. Many businesses around the world, and particularly the small and mid-sized businesses, will be very hardly hit by the shock that COVID has brought. The lockdown, the close down, whatever it may be, we need to manage through that. The third thing we need to do under COVID is we need to avoid that vital supply chains will collapse. Food system, medical supply systems need to be kept up and running, and their business has a critical role to play to make sure that in the next 6 to 12 months, none of these systems will collapse or lead to food or medical supply shortages. The fourth one is every business needs to adjust to whatever the new normal is. You know, that is as simple as, are people coming back to the offices the way they were before, or do we continue to work from home and begin to use offices in a different way? How do people travel? What do we think about meetings in the future? How will it change your business models? And then the last one, and in my mind, the most important element that every business leader must now address is, how do we think about long-term resilience of our supply chains? Because we've seen the shocks and the fallouts, but these shocks or similar shocks will happen again. and they might even be bigger than the one we've experienced now. What can we do to ensure our business model, our supply chains, our supplier base are robust and will withstand shocks like this? So that brings me to the sustainability agenda of every business on the line. Like I said, if we simplify sustainability to climate emergency, nature loss, and inequality, the question is, what is each company going to do about these issues? In climate, that means every company now must set a target to be at zero emissions by no later than 2050. Depending on the sector in which you operate, that seems like a tough target, but this is quickly becoming the norm. If your business wants to be competitive, then it does have to think about how to do that. That means that you need to take the science-based approach, and that means you need to start thinking about scenarios where by 2030, you will have halved your emissions. On nature, the impact on your business if externality pricing became the norm. That's an early conversation, but one that I see pick up a lot of momentum, and that I would argue every business must now begin to understand what the implications would be. In inequality, like I said, first and foremost, ensure that your business has an inclusive model, that it values diversity. And secondly, quite immediately, what is the future of work, the impact of technology, robotization, artificial intelligence going to be for the workforce? Then my last topic is, what will this change in capitalism actually mean? We now see at the global level an enormous conversation about we need to move to stakeholder capitalism. The World Economic Forum, I think it was 2 weeks ago, launched the thing called the Great Reset. 182 CEOs in North America signed the statement in November of last year saying the days of shareholder capitalism are over. We now need to serve all stakeholders, and therefore stakeholder capitalism is the way to go forward. On that area, what does that mean for business? Every company needs to now integrate environmental and social risks into its risk management, risk assessment procedures. So no longer just look at the balance sheet risks or economic risks, but include environmental and social risks. Integrate that in your decision making. Integrate it into standardized disclosures to capital markets, and fundamentally change the way we engage with investors. Because as I said, there is two big things coming out of the change of capitalism. One is the fiduciary obligations or the fiduciary duty of boards will change in the coming years to include not just the financial responsibilities, but integrate the environmental and the social aspects of your business. And secondly, the cost of capital calculation or the capital allocation model by investors will change to allocate more capital to the areas and the companies and the assets that have lower environmental and social aspects to deal with. So in WBCSD, we're building the Vision 2050 refresh. I believe the next issue brief that is coming out in a few weeks will be talking about stakeholder capitalism, the future of capitalism. So I would argue, take a good look out for that issue brief to come, because I fundamentally believe, certainly for the CEOs in the call today, that is going to be the most impactful conversation reaching your boardrooms very soon. WBCSD in the next few months will announce a groundbreaking partnership with a yet to be named partner that will fundamentally begin to build the bridge between forward-thinking companies and forward-thinking investors on how to accelerate the move towards this stakeholder capitalist model. Secondly, and I think highly relevant to Brazil, when we look at our own, and this is WBCSD's own people program, where we work on human rights, where we work on SDGs, where we work on the future of work, we have asked ourselves, are we really answering the question what business ought to do about inequality? And our conclusion is, it's all important, and some of the work is really impactful, but it's not yet at the heart of inequality and the contribution that business has to solve that. And therefore, later today, as we issue our project overview for 2021 for our member companies to sign up and engage with, we will include a new scoping project, which is called Tackling Inequality, a social contract for the 21st century. Because we need to get to the heart of inequality, and we need to have a better answer than I think business has today on what the contribution is that business can make to that. If, and I'll be interested to get some feedback on the call today, if that is as impactful and relevant to Brazil as I would expect it to be, then we would be very happy to work closely with Sebats to make sure that your voice and input is included in that piece of work that we'll be launching in the coming months. So I'll leave it at that. I'm extremely happy to be able to meet you all on Zoom. Sorry that travel is not possible at this stage, but we've learned to love Zoom, and I love you all. So great to see you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Peter, for a clear analysis. And I think you brought up such important issues here for to build this new vision that we are doing at the same time as WBCSD in Brazil. And inequality is such a big issue in Brazil. We are trying to address this with no longer delay. I would like to ask Tanya from the Microsoft Brazil president to talk a little bit about education and technology, and also how this, this can tackle inequality. Tanya, the floor is yours.
Hello, good morning to everyone. It is a great pleasure to see you. Well, I loved your presentation, and I loved this part of social contract for 21st century, and we really need to work this in Brazil. And education and technical skilling, because today I will focus on technical skilling or reskilling, is a big area tackled by companies, public sector, and NGOs in order to accelerate the power of technology. I'm a pioneer of SDG, and I really believe that technology can address all 7 objective goals. So how can we accelerate technology that can also accelerate economical growth? We have a study that shows that maximizing the adoption of artificial intelligence will increase the GDP growth by countries substantially. But the roadblock for that is the people capacity, people skilling, and people ready to take those new jobs. We have today in the world a big gap in terms of people in tech. 30% of jobs are constantly open, and we are not capable to fulfill those positions. And the other side, we have a big amount of people without jobs. And you see recently after COVID, additional dozens of millions of people losing their jobs in the whole world. COVID also accelerated the digital transformation. And we used to say at Microsoft that all companies are software companies. And this is more true today. And we did a recently study showing that by 2025, we will add 149 million new jobs in tech. We have today 41 million jobs in tech in the world. We will add in 5 years 149 million. So the only way, this is good because this can bring green growth for the country. We can help to decarbonize the economy. We can help to kill inequalities. But if you don't succeed to reskill the big portion of the workforce in the market today, we'll have millions of people losing their job and a big hole in the other side. So I really want to hear from you, considering this social contract that you have mentioned, what would be the role of private sector, public sector, and NGOs? And one data point here is also important. In the last 20 years, employers decreased substantially the investments in training of their people. So how can we revert this situation and engage those companies? Because governments alone will not answer to this equation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tanya. I would say there is, from my point of view, there are two answers, and maybe Filippo, if you're on the line, has additions as well. But I think first and foremost, we need to build a very solid case that indeed there is an increase of jobs as a result of all these new technologies. Because on the outset, I would say there is a high level of distrust in technology in societies, that it will replace jobs, and it's not automatically clear that the facts are actually different. The second element will be, and that to me is going to be the most important part of the social contract for the 21st century. It's unavoidable that many jobs will be replaced and that new jobs will be created, and nobody will argue that technology should be stopped. But we from the beginning need to build in the concept of just transition for the people. And that means reskilling or re-education, whatever the word is that you're comfortable with, is going to be an essential element of a person's career. Whether it's in one company or in multiple companies, you know, the models of continuous learning needs to be much more central. And I think business needs to take the lead there, because I believe that if you agree, I mean, that's an important starting point. If you agree that the responsibility of a company or the board of a company is to all stakeholders, including its employees, i.e. more than just to its shareholders, then it's the responsibility of the employer to make sure the employees are employable also in future scenarios. And therefore reskilling needs to become part of the solution that companies can offer. We then need to work with governments to create policies and tax regimes in place that if you pay an employee for education purposes, that gets a different tax treatment than if you pay them income or you fire them. And that way, I think you can build incentives to really make this transition towards these new technologies accelerate and engage both the employees, but also the employers, the companies. So I think education with an incentive scheme around it through policy or tax is going to be the way to make that happen.
I really believe on the policy side. So the pool of employers, clear, and we are committed. We just launched a program to reskill 25 million people in this already this year. And we have to work together in policies and review. Thanks, Peter. Marina?
Thank you, Tanya. I'd like to say that Franklin Feder, our former chair, is also with us. Let me see who else. There's a lot of CEOs here. Thank you for the CEO of Shell from Brazil, André Araújo. Also, André Alvarez, that we will talk, Mauricio Haddad from DSM, Orson from the Ecolab. You said, Peter, that one of the systemic transformations is that we have to look ahead of us. And I think renewable energy is one of the important issues that will lead this transformation. So I'd like to ask André Clarke from Siemens Energy Brazil, the CEO, to ask you a question and make some comments. André, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marina. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Peter, for sharing your thoughts. I think they are powerful and they are urgent. And your thoughts are guidelines that we need to move fast, particularly in the world of governments and politics. Is getting more and more complex, and the world organizations are being challenged. This is where business diplomacy must unite, and unite fast. On the energy side, Peter, Brazil is a powerhouse. It is green. It is green above any other nation, far above, actually. And it's growing. Renewables in Brazil are growing even during COVID. I cannot say how many investors are moving and pushing their investments even during COVID into renewables into biomass, biogas, even Brazil launching the largest world carbon pricing into fuels, which is Renovabil, which is quite unknown elsewhere. However, at the same time, Brazil is facing probably one of its worst external images crisis at this point in time. Moreover, a big part of the renewable energy in Brazil will also come from agriculture. We're also seeing Brazil as a powerhouse in mining, and mining will resurge as a new mining proposition in Brazil. Very large companies such as Vale are doing fantastic changes in their portfolios, way of acting, and so on. And it also has a lot to do with energy. Given that Brazil is a powerhouse in that, I mean, it is renewable, it's going to stay renewable, and also Brazil is going forward with the exploration of the pre-salt, which is one of the world's largest and most, let's say, carbon balanced resources in the world, and it needs to explore it to create wealth for the rest of the development of the country. And all the companies acting in Brazil are decarbonizing its oil exploration as well. How do you see the image of Brazil development in energy from your side of the world, Peter? You're in mute.
Peter, you are in mute.
Sorry. I think it's a story untold, if I'm honest. I think your examples sound powerful and convincing, but I think we need to do more work, and I'm sure we can help from the global level, but we need to work them probably with Sebats to tell these stories more clearly. I think you all are international business people. You will know that the image of Brazil at the moment is under severe pressure from an international point of view. The politics that are playing in the country, the deforestation of the Amazon, these are the main issues that the world will probably mention when you say Brazil. And so if there are positive stories to be told, we should make sure that these are well told and exported. I think, if I am honest, the most important opportunity I would see for Brazil is, and it is partially playing into the renewable energy, partly playing into the image or the reputation around the forests, is the world is getting ready to very significantly scale up what we call natural climate solutions, sequestration of carbon in forests, in wetlands, in grasslands, whatever it may be. So reforestation is going to be a massive global conversation, and maybe from where you sit, you have no idea how many international activities, foundations, and companies are now rallying around this topic. And as and when COP26 happens, now scheduled, I believe, November 2021, I would expect natural climate solutions to be one of, if not the most important conversations that will emerge in the global climate scene. The big change, because when COP21 happened in Paris a few years ago, we were also talking about using forest as carbon sinks, but we then came at it from the supply side, with forestry companies saying, yeah, if you plant trees, you sequester carbon. But the big change in the global conversation has now emerged that all the emitters have said natural climate solutions are probably the most cost-effective solutions to deal with climate change, particularly in the short run, because moving to fundamentally other energy sources will take longer to get them on the right side of the cost curves. natural climate solutions have the potential to sequestrate 38% of the global emissions. So there's massive opportunities out there. I think if given the strengths that Brazil has traditionally in the forest space, with some of the leading companies in your part of the world involved, I would try to position Brazil as one of the lead markets for natural climate solutions. And if you collectively can do that, and if you can link it in, and again, we can help because we're part of the Natural Climate Alliance, which is a big global thing, trying to coordinate all the efforts, then I think that would be a second platform to really work on the positioning of Brazil in a positive light, not just in the more pressing issues that the world looks at now.
Thank you, Peter.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, I do agree. I think we try to always show for everyone here in Brazil that production and preservation, they can be together. Our companies that operate in Amazonia, they always do that. By the way, we are here with Andrea Alvarez, that you really know very well, is part of her board. And she also will tell us about biodiversity and what it will be after the coronavirus crisis. What can you expect, Andrea?
Hello, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Peter. Good morning, Marina. It's a pleasure to be here. Peter, fantastic, your comments. It's always a pleasure to listen to you. And, yes, the systems need to change. A couple of weeks ago, Natura & Co. issued our 2030 sustainability vision, and we're calling it our commitment to life. And it basically has 3 pillars. We're aiming to address the climate change and protect the Amazon by achieving net zero carbon emissions and halting deforestation in the Amazon by 2025, working collectively to do that. That's an ambition. To defend human rights and be humankind, so creating better, kinder, more inclusive conditions for all of our networks to thrive in. And then the third commitment is to really embrace circularity and regeneration by moving towards moving towards a circular economic model to create more than it takes to ensure packaging circularity and so on and so forth. But I wanted to touch more specifically on biodiversity and picking on your last comment about reforestation. Natura has a long history of operating in the Amazon. We've been there for over 20 years in that ecosystem. And we've created a business model that actually has produced the capacity to conserve 1.8 million hectares of land, which is equivalent to half of the Netherlands, which actually comparing to the Amazon is not enough. It is definitely not enough, but it is important to see that through this business model, we are able to not only address social issues and create different income for people that are better than deforesting, as well as creating economic development. So I guess my question to you is, given the complexity of dealing with the elimination of deforestation in the region, we have always viewed this as a challenge that we need to embark on together with more agents. Not, no single company, no single agent, whomever they may be, will be able to tackle the deforestation challenge we have. So we do need several industries working together. We need government, we need civil society, we need academia, we need all the help we can get. It was curious that in the 6 systems that you mentioned, political reform or the political system being rethought was actually not one of them. So I was curious as to how can we, if capitalism is to evolve to stakeholder capitalism, how can we also engage in a way and actually help the political systems to also thrive and recover a lot of the trust that we need them to have. We need governments to be trusted. We need institutions to work. We need that to thrive so that we need independence of these institutions, and we need collaboration between all sectors. I wanted to hear your views on that.
Yeah, thank you. That's an intriguing question. I think, I mean, the honest answer is probably that if you're in the World Business Council, you always try to stay as cautious as you can in making political statements, because the world is such a diverse place. Whatever you say, there's always some regime somewhere that will take offense to what we say. So normally we avoid going too deep into it. It's clear. I would argue our biggest contribution, and I would even argue the same for Sebad's, our biggest contribution is the ability to bring value chains together. And they, by definition, span across the world. Because many of our members, and yourselves included, the very large global companies, you may be Brazil headquartered or Netherlands headquarters, but your operations go right across the world. And you're right in the sense that no individual company can solve all the many challenges that are on our path. But if you organize value chains, you will create very powerful forces. And if these powerful forces in value chains begin to align and come up with a clear set of policy recommendations, then you will begin to see that we touch not one government in Brazil or wherever it may be, but right across the globe, you'll begin to get a consistent ask for policy. So the way we at the World Business Council try to deal with the policy side or the politics side of things is every of our programs, so each of the 6 ones I mentioned, has a number of team members that focus on nothing but the policy aspects of that system transformation. And through those 6 policy teams, we will create, and in some cases better than others, no doubt, but we will create the common voice of business that is based in the value chain solutions that we and the members can work through, and then be brought to, in our case, big global meetings, in your case, hopefully big Brazilian meetings. And I think that's so far been our approach. I think at the personal level, it's easy to have all kind of political reflections, but based in Geneva, me having a view on what's going on the ground in Brazil may lead to some laughs and more frowns and even some anger. So I don't think I want to go there.
Thank you. No, thank you. No, and I wasn't pushing you to make any specific political comments. It was actually it's a global look at political systems in general and institutions in general. How can we recover trust in governments everywhere globally, not here? It wasn't even specifically Brazil.
That's one element, trust in governments. How do you regain that? But what I find even more worrying at this point in time, how can we make governments around the world get back to the position that only if governments work together, if countries work together, just if only if value chains work together, will we be able to be successful? Because unless people think there is a better model than a globalized economy, which would be a massive transformation in itself if you wanted to move away from that, we need to continue to count on governments to make the multilateralism somehow work. And the more we break that down, as is currently happening in a number of countries around the world, the more troublesome it will be for global solutions to emerge for the challenges we face.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, I do agree. And I think what we are doing here in Sebad's, and inspired by WBCSD also with the Vision 2050, we'll come up with this value change solutions that you talk. And I think that has to inspire, you know, in this recession that we are facing, in this difficult times that we are facing. I think by the end of the year, so the ones that are attending here, we try to launch this at the end of the year. I also have a question, Peter, from the CEO of Shell Brazil, André, about supply chain. André? The
Hi,
micro.
Peter. How are you doing? I hope you're doing fine. I listened very carefully when you start sharing with us here that one of your areas that you study more is about supply chain. And you mentioned, if I'm not wrong, and I think rightly so, that companies in general, we stretch the supply chain, working more and more on downsizing and just-in-time activities. And clearly, the pandemic demonstrates that we have to review the way things are doing. Probably most of us around the globe felt the challenges. Some could overcome more quickly, some were more challenging. But when we think about a resilient supply chain for the future, we start to see as well a lot of opportunistic approach in theories trying to bring some populism into this debate, particularly when we start to see a good amount of national protective and potentially very strong uncompetitive solutions on the table. So this is an area that we do see the need for change, but at the same time can bring a lot of unsustainable, economically speaking, proposals to companies. So how do you see this debate moving forward in a kind of a balance looking ahead?
Yeah, to me, it's always the same. The big changes we are facing, there's four things that each of us on the line can do, and we need to do them in the same order, all of us. First is, what are your personal changes you're going to make? How do you travel? What do you eat? All these type of issues. The second is, what can you do with your company? We just listened to Andrea. The ambitions that Natura has put out are unrivaled, I would say, globally. It's an amazing integrated package. I would say the same for Shell. Together with BP, you are now the leading oil and gas companies, the first ones of the majors to come out with the statement that you're going to be net zero by 2050. Once the company is changed, we need to change the sector. And once the sector is changed, we can talk about changing the world. Fundamental in all of this change is we must redefine what economic success is. If we think we can get to a fully sustainable world, let's even simplify it, to a fully decarbonized world, without a change in the economic system, we will not fail. We will fail. We will not make it, or not make it anywhere near on time. So we need to get serious on things like carbon pricing. We need to get serious about companies deeply understanding and disclosing the risks they are exposed to as a result of, in this case, climate change or biodiversity loss or any of the other topics. And we need to make sure that capital markets will differentiate the companies that do have a plan, an ambition, and a strategy to deal with these challenges versus the ones who do not. I think decarbonization, we're at a point, or in most countries in the world, very close to a point where the economic or the business case can already be made for these transitions. That's not true for all other challenges at all. Take for instance, the food system. Globally, the food system has a market value, an economic market value of $10 trillion annually. Globally, the hidden cost to produce those $10 trillion of value are $12 trillion of value, meaning the environmental damage, the health damage, the poverty damage that we do in societies. There, a simple solution like carbon pricing probably won't work, and we need to think much deeper about how do we change the economic system to reflect that. In that context, it's very intriguing to be in a global position like we are here in the World Business Council, because at the moment it's quite popular to be anti-Chinese, given some of the things that happen around Hong Kong and the likes. But if you listen to the speech that the Chinese Prime Minister made a few weeks ago, in the preparation, it's the first global or first big speech in the run-up to the 14th five-year plan of China. We have seen that his speech said, we can no longer develop China thinking about GDP. We must fundamentally rethink what the success measure for China will be. We must include well-being of people. We must include the health of nature. So I think, you know, in different parts of the world, different solutions will be tested. Platforms like ours and the connection we have into your platform at Sebets can share these lessons quickly, and hopefully over time and on time, that will change the conversations about it might be short-term bet for your financials or your P&L or your business case, but in the new context with the new measures of success, it's clearly the better thing to do.
Peter, can I ask you one more question from Mauricio, because we are still, it's already 9 o'clock, but I'd like Mauricio, CEO of DSM, to have the floor. Mauricio? The last
Peter.
question, okay?
Hi, Peter. Thank you, Marina. Thank you, Peter. It's good to see you again, and then really a pleasure to hear your messages. And by the way, I like very much simplicity, so we are very much aligned into that. I think last Davos World Economic Forum, we could feel the environment is moving from less talking to more acting, and this is very good. I think this is really something that we need to do. Now, just being consistent with my simplicity and assertiveness, can I ask you, you mentioned these 3 topics, climate, biodiversity, and inequality. What can we that are part of Sebets do? Can you give us, 3 points that we should really work upon into these 3 topics that should be a priority for us? Also taking into consideration what has been said many times, the image that we have externally. So what are the 3 topics that you suggest us, recommend us to work in the near future, that we start to see more action and less discussion? Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, so I will answer it through what are we doing in the World Business Council with the global members, your company included. We are in the process to upgrade the membership criteria for WBCSD. We will add 5 criteria to the membership of WBCSD. One is every company must set an ambition to be net zero by no later than 2050. So that's decarbonization. Second is all companies must have an ambition to not for net zero loss of nature. The third one is all companies must commit to the UN guiding principles for human rights, do the due diligence, and disclose the progress. The fourth is inclusion and diversity should be part of the ambition of the companies. And the fifth one is the company must be part of the upgrades in capitalism, specifically implement TCFD, and be part of the global movement towards standardized ESG disclosures. So these are 5 boxes that we have identified, which will change the conversation we have with the companies. I think something similar you ought to consider for Sebets, because I think if you're truly the leading companies in Brazil, which I know many of you are, then what we need to establish is what is the norm that you believe is achievable in the Brazilian business community. Secondly, like I said, COP26 is now 1.5 years away. I think natural climate solutions are going to be a critical topic for the success of that COP. I would hope, and I would be very curious in the coming months to hear from you, that through Sebets and other initiatives, you can position Brazilian businesses in collaboration to really take a leading role in the implementation of those solutions. I think it would significantly help the Brazilian reputation as a country, but furthermore, it will create massive economic opportunities for Brazil, because there's now literally billions of dollars looking for solutions in the natural climate solution space. And if you can suck these into Brazil, that's going to be very helpful to your economy, to the employability and all that. And then the third point is, given that, you know, Brazil is probably amongst the best developed countries where inequality is the most urgent issue, I think we really need to work together. And Vision 2050 and the new social contract work that we're starting can be a channel for that, to really say, what are innovative solutions to deal with inequality? And I think, well, it happens to be the same three priorities, but I think these are really practical things that I hope Sebets can latch onto and that you collectively can work on.
Thank you very much, Peter. Appreciate it. Thanks, Marita.
Thank you, Mauricio. Thank you, Peter. Well, we are addressing this. We are talking to Filippo, Peter, about the new criteria for our members. Since we are global members, I think that makes completely sense, because it's not, a big deal to make this to raise the bar for the new criteria. For the next COP, I think we change a lot. In the last COP by private sector, we were the ones that move ahead the Article 6. So we started this movement, and we hope that in the next COP, this really are more clear. We are doing a very strong advocacy for that. So Article 6, forest, those are the main issues that we are trying to tackle. But also carbon pricing, because we are doing, we have a proposal on carbon pricing that has already 13 sectors here in Brazil, and we're talking with the economy ministers to put it in place. So this is already, from this leaders, the Council of Leaders, we made that, but since the pandemic crisis came, we had to stop this strategy. But this is already in place. Inequality, I think that's the big issue for Brazil. Peter are right, the perception of all of you are right. We find out that we have invisible people here in Brazil by the pandemic crisis. The government couldn't reach these people. The private sector couldn't reach these people. So we had to manage in such a different ways. We're having calls every Monday, to talk about this and to make changes from companies. What can we help and in innovative ways? We have Marli here. We have also some members of our council that are here and trying to help us. Also thinking about finance. Peter talked a lot about how can we invest in the right way. So finance is another important issue here in Brazil. We have some investments on green bonds, but we have to really accelerate this process. Well, I think that's it. We are out of time. I'd like to thank so much, Peter, for your presence here and your inputs. It's very valuable for our Vision 2050. We keep working together, and thank you for the audience. This is a webinar. This is a sequence of webinars. So we are trying to launch our vision by the end of this year, as I said, and also WBCSD is trying to do the same. And I think there will be an inspiration not only for business but also for the whole society. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we can see each other, but
it was nice to see you anyway.
Big hug from Brazil.
Big hug back. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Great.
Thank you.
With all of you.
Bye.
Good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.